to go? All right, I think it's just about time, so let's get started. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to TechEd. Welcome to Houston. We're super happy to have you here. I hope you're having a fantastic first day at the conference here. My name's Faisal Mahmood. I'm a program manager on the Power Query team at Microsoft.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miguel Llopis, and I'm also a program manager in the Power Query team. My main responsibility on Power Query is about the user experience. So for some of you who've already used Power Query, and if you've hit anything that looked confusing or you couldn't figure out how to do it, that was my fault. But since I'm going to be here all the week, feel free to approach us after the session or throughout the week on the booth on the expo area so that we can talk about it and hopefully we'll fix it. So
the way this works is Miguel takes all the blame, I take all the credit, and we're a happy family. So it's been a year since I did the overview talk at TechEd New Orleans. How many of you were there for Power Query? So a few of you. This is going to be somewhat of an overlap, and as we were designing this talk, we thought, well, if folks come back to the talk again, we don't want it to be a complete repeat. So we've taken a bit of a different approach here. We are still going to spend a bunch of time talking about why Power Query is interesting. So we'll spend some time there. But then most of the talk's really going to be focused on the things we've done since last year. So everything, we do monthly updates. So everything we've done month after month, you'll be seeing a lot of the features here. So this will still be hopefully fresh for a lot of you. Now, since you're joining us in person, we also have a special surprise for you. We're actually going to show you some of the things that are not public yet, mainly in the way of user experiences, things we're improving. So you'll get to see some things that are brand new that very few folks outside of Microsoft have actually seen. So that we think you'll find useful. How many of you already installed and use Power Query day to day? All right, so that's better than last year, and we're clearly making progress. So, and Power Pivot? Oh, okay, all right. So more. So we started down the self-service BI journey a few years ago with Power Pivot, right? We introduced this Power Pivot add-in for Office 2010. That's really when this whole thing kind of started out in terms of Excel and BI experiences in Excel. And what we did with Power Pivot was quite revolutionary at the time, right? We basically gave you an enterprise-grade in-memory analytics engine in your desktop machine, right? So the more memory you had, the better it was, but that was pretty cool to have something that, effectively AS, Analysis Services, runs on the server. You have all of that power on the desktop. So you have things like models containing tables and relationships and all of that stuff in Excel, which was pretty new at the time, still is quite amazing. We followed that up with Power View, right? So 2013, Excel has Power View built in. It has Power Pivot and the X-Velocity engine built in. So you have all this capability to do pretty cool visualizations over your data, except we never showed you in any of the demos how we actually got the data into the workbook, right? We always started out with a workbook that was filled with data, and the dirty little secret was, well, it was actually quite a bit of work to get that data in. Power Map, I should have gone to that slide, is another visualization engine and capability that you have in Excel today. So again, same problem. How do you get data to all of those tools? So Power Query really is focused on two things. Allowing you to find data that you care about in Excel, right? It should be easy for you within Excel to find the data that you want, whether it's internal data or external data, so public, premium, things that data vendors sell, for example, as well as enterprise data, sales revenue, forecasting, finance, whatever kinds of data that you have within your firewall. And then, of course, experiences for self-service data transformations, mashups. So you can think of it as ETL for the masses, right? So SSIS and the capability of doing those kinds of things right within Excel, including things like merging multiple data sources, right? All of that done as an end user, as an information worker using Excel. So that's why we introduced Power Query. And the promise here is we're not going to use any prep data, right? Any demo you see today, we're going to be getting the data fresh from the sources, bringing it in, and doing the sets of things we care about. So current state of the art, I did this last year as well, just to sort of put in context the kinds of experiences you have today, right? So taking Excel, we have the data tab. This is how you primarily bring data into Excel. And the data tab's been around for a long time. We have evolved it, but we have a set of fragmented experiences for many good reasons, right? We can't immediately just sort of pull the rug from underneath and change these experiences in a single day. But here's an example. From Access, you get a set of dialogues that lead you through picking some tables and bringing them in. From Web, actually some nice things about it. You get an actual preview and a rendering of the web page, and you can select the data that you care about. Except it doesn't work a lot of the times, right? It just has a lot of limitations. And I'm being honest about the state of things here. From Text, works well, but is pretty crude and yet another experience, right? And a set of options around delimiters and the kind of typing that you want around data types, and some advanced text import settings and so on. From SQL Server, so we start to get a little better. We allow you to specify a server name. You pick a bunch of tables, and you essentially import data down. It's really hard if you want to do things like filtering. I haven't used this experience in a long time to know whether or not filtering was even possible, but certainly previews were not possible. So of course, 2 data tabs are better than 1. So we, as we designed Power Pivot, the limitations that we had, we of course wanted to overcome, and so Power Pivot, has its own data tab, and this of course leads to even more fragmentation. The focus of the Power Pivot team was not data acquisition, data shaping, data import, and so this is where we are, right? But it's better. It's actually a lot better. And if you're using Power Pivot, you're probably primarily using this experience, where you can pick, it's a bit more modern, and actually you get previews. Pretty cool. So previews, you'll see, is a fundamental part of what Power Query supports, and is almost crucial for the experience we enable. A whole bunch of data sources, so yet again, a set of data sources that you can import from. And finally, we have this one experience. This is age-old, but the thing that I'm about to show you, my clicker, the range isn't good. Anyone know what that is? Microsoft Query. How many of you still use it? A few, right? And the Excel team would tell you that they are still seeing a lot of usage of this technology, because it supports a lot of things that aren't available anywhere else in Excel, right? That is until we, of course, start using Power Query, where essentially the set of capability is all there, and you can pretty much stop using some of these experiences. So why Power Query? So let's talk about a few key aspects of Power Query, and this will be the last slide, and we're going to jump into demos. So discovery, I mentioned, is a key part of what we're enabling with Power Query, both public and corporate. The corporate part is new. We'll cover it new since last year, so we'll cover that. Connectivity to a wide range of data sources, right? This is paramount. Whether you're talking to big data, small data, whether it's structured, unstructured, semi-structured, whether it's text data or whether it's schematized data coming from a database, whether it's web APIs, right? We want to support it all, because in this day and age, you don't control the kinds of data sources that are coming out. Every day, folks come out with new data sources. If you look, especially in the world of big data, data formats are popping up, like there's no tomorrow. So connectivity to a wide range of data sources is key. The second point here is experience. We focus a lot on the experience, and the thing that we wanted to deliver was first-class user experience that will allow you to feel your data. Again, doesn't matter how big or small, but as you're working with your data, you can feel the data and you can get interactive feedback on what your data is going to look like. Consistency of experience, again, we wanted to unify everything. So it doesn't matter whether you're talking to SQL, whether you're talking to text, right? Or whether you're talking to a web API. you have one experience for talking to all of those data sets. Now, that also means one set of capabilities, right? When you're talking to a text file, importing that, you can still do group bys and joins and all of that. In cases where the system, the underlying system supports those capabilities, we still want to leverage those capabilities, right? So things will get pushed down to the server as much as possible. In cases where those capabilities are not available, such as a text file, Power Query will compensate and do those things for you. So you have this one consistent experience over all data sources. The last bit here is about joins across data sources. So merge is a key component of what we're delivering. So merging, mashing up, blending, call it what you will, but taking different data sources and joining them across data types, pretty cool and pretty key in the kinds of requirements we're seeing today. The last bit here is, of course, with Power BI, this isn't on the slide, anything you create, any view that you create over data can be shared back into the organization through Power BI for Office 365. So you can actually reuse, and others can discover the things you've created. So we'll look at that. So demo time. Let's switch, and Miguel's going to help me here with a set of demos.
All right, let's get going. So this is, as we promised, a blank workbook. We're just going to create it now. There's no data on it.
There's no data. So let's look at the Power Query tab. What we've done is we've installed the publicly available version of Power Query, the latest and greatest. We put an update out when was it, last week, I think?
Last Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah. And this is, so we're just showing you what's already out there. So the Power Query tab, if you will, is in form very similar to the Data tab. So you can see that we have a set of data sources. The familiarity is by design. We want folks who are familiar with the Data tab to be comfortable. So you can import data from a whole bunch of sources like web, a set of file-based sources, so Excel, CSV, XML, a folder as a data source. So if you have a hierarchy of files, you can treat that as one logical unit. A set of databases, so SQL Server, SQL Azure, Access, a whole bunch of third-party databases, so Oracle, Teradata, MySQL, they're all supported. And then a set of non-traditional data sources, right? So you have SharePoint lists, OData feeds, Windows Azure Marketplace. We also have Hadoop file system as a data source, and some things that that would be useful in the realm of big data consumption. So Azure Blobs, Azure Tables, Microsoft Exchange, that's a new one we'll be showing you, Facebook, and many more on the way. SAP Business Objects Universe as a data source, we just added that a couple of months ago. It's still in preview, but the latest build out there has it in preview. You can play with that. We also have online search, right? So it's a first-class concept here. So you can come into search, and you can find some data. So let's say we're looking for the greatest cities or the largest cities in Americas. The greatest one, I think, would be a bit controversial. So what we're seeing here is interactive preview, right? So I can actually hover over the things that I'm seeing. And we, Microsoft, have a data catalog, which essentially hosts a whole bunch of curated public data, right? What you're seeing here is data from Wikipedia and so on that are curated. And I can actually, in a single click, well, double click, Miguel would tell you, bring that data down, right? But it's a single gesture, and it's as simple as that, right? To consume data from the catalog, bring it down into Excel, right? So not bad. The other thing to keep in mind is you'll see a workbook queries pane there. This is actually a living artifact. This workbook is connected. It's connected to the data source we just imported from. So I can always come back and refresh, right? It never goes stale. And also, you can go into this editing experience that will help you reshape some of this data. Data is almost never in the shape, right, that you want or expect. So this is where we do most of our work. This is what lets us reshape the data. You can notice that the image column is blank. The key column maybe is unnecessary, so we can go ahead and remove those columns, right? Pretty simple. And let's actually duplicate the country column, because I'm interested in having a column called that's effectively city, comma, country. So we can take those two, and we can merge those columns, right? So Miguel's going to go into merge, and he's going to merge those with a custom separator, in this case, a comma space. Great. And then we can give it a new name. And we have our table. Notice, as I was doing these things, that Power Query was recording a set of steps in the applied steps section of the query editor. And what this is really just sort of building on each step that you performed and recording that. So I can play those back whenever. I can go back in time and look at what the source looked like, and I can see what I've done, right? And if you were to actually go into the query editor, which Miguel's going to do here, so let's look at the actual advanced editor, you can see we have a query. So this is what makes it all possible, is we have codified the set of steps, and so this lets me run this thing whenever, on demand. When I hit refresh, our query engine picks up, runs it, reshapes the data, brings it down, right? So that's how it all works. Are we ready to visualize this?
All right, yeah, absolutely. So let's go into some of the one of the other tools that's part of Power BI, as Faisal was mentioning. This is one of the visualizations tool, which is Power View. So how many of you guys have ever used Power View? Quite a bit. All right, good. So let's go in and just insert the new Power View report in Excel 2013. So it comes with Excel 2013 today if you get Excel 2013. So now as it loads up, I'm just going to close the workbook queries pane so I get more space here. And I'm just going to turn this into a map. So now I actually get all of these, but it's not looking quite nice. You see that there's a bunch of cities in the US, but they're all showing on the same place. So that's because I need to fix up the configuration of this report, of this chart. And for that, I need to play with these fields here on the Power View fields area. So for location, instead of using country, I'm going to drop that out. And I'm going to use the location column, the one that we created with custom. And there you go. There are my cities. But now there's more customizations that we could do here. For instance, I'm going to just remove the rank. And I'm going to add the population as the size. So the bigger the bubble is, the higher the population is. So any guesses for who is or what's the greatest or largest city in the Americas? Anyone?
Sao Paulo.
So yeah, that's the only thing that Brazil is going to win this year, by the way. There's no way they're going to get the World Cup. So enjoy it if there's any Brazilian here.
There's a lot more of that to come, and I'm sorry if that's not tasteful, but but Miguel's going to put you through some of his jokes there. There's some good ones too, I got to admit. So that's pretty cool, right? We started out with nothing, really. We brought some data down that you could find anywhere. You could have copied and pasted it, but the set of things we did, reshaping that as we wanted, bringing it all down, making this whole thing refreshable, is I think pretty cool. Do you like that? Yeah. So let's actually switch gears and speed it up to something else. Then we talked about search. How about connecting to a data source that we know we want to pull data from, right? So let's look at a web page. Here's a set of web pages again, sports being the theme that you're going to see here. We're going to pull data from this, right? So let's actually connect to this web page.
All right, let's do that. So I'll just copy the URL, and then we're going to go into the From Web Experience in Power Query. So the first thing, I paste in the URL, and now you see this navigator pane come in. And the delay here is because it's downloading the HTML page, and Power Query is parsing that page, so it identifies all of the tables here. So now the result came back, and you see that there's a few tables that they were at the top of the page and we don't need. But this table 3 is the one that we want. So we could double-click it and get into the query editor experience again. And here I can, remember on the first demo that we searched and we landed the data into the worksheet directly? Here we're going to turn things around. So we want to reshape the table before we land it into the worksheet so that it's clean from the get-go.
Yep.
And so let's take a look at this table. What's interesting here, Faisal?
Yeah, so any guesses on what might be problematic here, how you might want to clean this up? Separate out those things. Yeah, there's like 3 things in there. There's the rank, there's the name, and there's the country, right? So let's go ahead and take care of that. Power Query lets you split things very easily. So let's go ahead and split by delimiter. And let's do at the leftmost delimiter, we're going to split on a space. So we only want to split once, right? Mm-hmm. And then we can go ahead and split again. So let's split by delimiter on the open paren, right?
We just do the rightmost here, just in case somebody has a paren on the name?
Yep, exactly. And then finally, let's go ahead and replace values and remove the parens, the trailing parens. And we seem to have a better shape here. So Miguel's going to fix up some types, and then let's rename to give these things better names. All right. So I think we have our data set, and we're ready to visualize once again.
Okay, let's do that. So let's take a look at different analysis here. I won't get into soccer demos to demonstrate anything, because I don't really need to, like you all know. But what I'm going to do here, and that's the Italian guy laughing downstairs, but that's good. All right, so I'm going to go inside a new Power BI report, and we're going to just do an analysis. We got the top 100 tennis players from the ATP rank page. That's a weekly rank that gets updated every week, every Monday. So we just got a fresh update. So here's the table that we have. This is the top 100. So I'll just keep this around here on the right. I'm going to make it bigger. I'll sort by rank ascending, so you know who's the guy on top. But yeah, I don't even need to name him. But we're going to look at some analysis by nationality here. So let's create a new table on the side. Let's look at, for instance, how many players from each nationality are within the top 100. And for that, we could use the nationality field, and we could use the rank one, and we're going to say here the count of the different values. And let's turn this into a stack bar, and again, let's sort this by rank, and let's use descending so we see the one and only with the most players on top. There
Any
you go.
guesses where Miguel's from?
Right. So just to complete this, because it looks, it's kind of tight between Spain and France in here. There's just 2 players difference, and I really don't feel good about it because I like to just, with neighbors how things are. So let's actually look at a different field here. We're going to bring in, again, the nationality, but in this case, we're going to look at the sum of the points of all the players from that nationality. And let's see how that looks if we use a stack column. And again, let's sort by the number of points. So who's on top? Again, so with twice the points or more than twice the points. So here's Italy, by the way. Good job, guys. But you might be saying, yeah, of course, because there's this guy on top, which I won't pronounce his name, but I'm going to filter him out so you just see that it's not just him. So see how Spain, with this guy, we have a little bit over 30,000 points. And I'm going to select everyone else, and then I'm going to filter that guy out. So still, it's starting to get tight, but still you see how we're on top with the points as well. And so there was a 12,000 points difference, which if you go down here, you see the US, for instance, they got 6,000 points. So that basically means that Nadal has twice as many points as all of the US players together. So, but that's just some quick analysis that you could draw from the data from a website, which is pretty cool. And of course, this is all refreshable. You can refresh this query every day, every week, and you'll get the latest and greatest.
Great. Some entertainment value there for you. So I can't promise that we won't have any more pro-Spain jokes, by the way. So you're in for the treat. So let's actually take this a bit more bit further, and slightly different take on a demo that I did last year. How many of you know of Professor Hans Rosling? Any of you seen his TED videos? Yeah. So he does these amazing mashups, right, where he gets data, macroeconomic data, and does analysis, correlations. So he does things like, I'm going to take an indicator of health, an indicator of wealth, and total population, look at that over time and see how countries are doing, right? And whether things are moving in the right direction or not. And so we're going to essentially recreate the kind of demo that he does, except we're going to use Power Query and Excel. So he, of course, has this website, Gapminder, where he has all of these fantastic data in Excel format. So we're going to essentially take the indicator of health here, BMI. So let's look at BMI for women, for example. We're going to copy that link, and we're simply going to come into Excel and paste that in from web. So we're going to go connect up to the data source. Notice the data source, by the way, and we're going to bring the tables down. So the first table looks all right, so we're going to bring that in, and now we have our data. So what's wrong? So our columns are off. So we have, the first row here is really metadata, so let's use first row as headers and fix that. And then, what do we want to do here? If you've seen the thing I've done before, the data is pivoted. The data is essentially a report, right? And it's not really useful in this context for analysis. One of the things we did with Power Query early on was the ability to take this and unpivot it, so to make it way more useful. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to take the set of columns and one click to unpivot all of that data, right? And now this data is much more useful. We're going to fix a set of things here. We're going to call the numeric value there BMI. We're going to call the year value actually year. And we have our data. So let's call this BMI.
All right.
And we're done, right? So we have our first data set. Now, I could go and get GDP, the wealth indicator, and total population exactly as I did here. This time, we're going to do something different. We're going to actually sign into Power BI for Office 365. And we're going to try and find that data, right? So before this talk, I went and did the exact same set of steps over those two other data sets, created those queries, published those queries into my corporate catalog. So all we're going to do is really sign in, which if this shows up. There.
All right.
So we're signed in.
OK, yeah, we are. And then we're going to go into online search.
Let's go ahead and search for GDP per capita. And now you're going to see, in addition to public results, we're also seeing corporate results. You're going to see that there's a thing published by me, and we're simply going to go into the edit experience here.
I told you this thing was slow. We should have used OneDrive, but OK, that's fine.
So we're actually connecting, pulling down the query, connecting to spreadsheetsgoogle.com where the data set resides, and we're bringing it down, right? So this is actually good. Yeah, looks good to me. So let's actually disable that load to worksheet. We're disabling it because we're not interested in materializing this data in the workbook. We're actually interested in the final mashup. So we'll hang on to that. We're going to do the same thing for total population, right? So we're going to pull that down. So let's look for total population. Once again, I'm just finding a query that I've previously published, bringing that down, and let's do the same thing here.
All right.
All right. So we have the basics. We have the three data sets that we want to merge together. We want to create a fourth query that's actually the merge of these three, right? So let's go into the merge experience, and we're going to now pick BMI and income GDP per capita, and we're going to join on those two columns, so country and year. And we're going to say we only include matching rows because some of those tables have more rows. And then we end up with a new column added to the BMI data set, and I can simply pick the column that I want. So we're going to expand and pick GDP. We're going to call the name of the column GDP as well, and we're going to now do something slightly different. In this case, we're already in the editor. This is new as well. And while I'm in the editor, I can actually bring in more tables to join. So I can merge queries from within here, which will essentially do an inline merge into the existing query. So we're going to pick total population, and we're going to pick those two same columns. Again, include matching rows only, and we'll get our final, near final data set. So let's pick population, and let's do the same ceremony of renaming.
All right, we're good.
And we have our final data set, right? So let's actually load this into the worksheet.
Let's give it a nice name. BMI, GDP, and population.
Great. And finally, let's try and visualize this. So once this is done, let's insert a Power View. And what we're going to do is essentially, if a set of fields should be pre-selected for us, we're just going to uncheck year, and we're going to turn this into a scatter plot. So looking good. That's looking like the shape that I want. Now we're going to actually add the year dimension here as on the play axis, right? So we actually get to see the series move over time. And there's quite a few bubbles here. So let's actually filter and pick a set of countries that are close to 100 million or so. Maybe, maybe a bit more, right?
All right.
OK, you can already see the final state of who's leading the pack, both in terms of wealth and in terms of unhealthiness, I would say. So there we go, right? We're getting richer. We're also getting fatter. And what you read is true, folks. But look at Japan. Actually, it's kind of interesting, right? They're like, kind of doing the right thing here. So clearly, we have something to learn from the Japanese.
Right.
So that's pretty good. Again, what about Spain?
I don't know. We play a lot of soccer, I guess that's maybe why.
Good question. I don't know. We'll have to go back and do that, and that might give me some fodder to give Miguel a hard time.
Yeah.
So that is, if you think about it, just take a moment to think about what we just did in, again, just a set of minutes, right? We connected to 3 different data sources on the web. We unpivoted, reshaped that data, all coming from a source like Excel. It's not coming from a database. We merged those things together, and we visualize this, and the whole end-to-end is done, right? It's right there. So I think that's pretty cool. Now,
new workbook?
We want to actually take this same query that we've published, the mashup, and we'll show you how we're going to share this mashup into the corporate catalog. So we're going to go into Power Query tab, and we're going to take that query that we have, the final query, and we're simply going to say share. This is the sharing experience that lets me specify metadata, the set of things that allow me to control visibility, so who it should be shared with, for example. In this case, I'm going to share it with everyone at Microsoft, and I'm simply going to publish. This will make it possible for anyone else to find that data set and use it. It's just the query. So if this thing were connecting to a database, the user would still need access rights to the database. We're not moving any data around, right? It's just the set of steps. So it's this virtual sort of view over data that we've shared. And that's a powerful way of just sort of sharing information within the organization. All right. So one of the data sources that we have had a lot of requests for over the 3 years that I've been working on this thing is multidimensional data, right? And analysis services, of course, is the prime example of that. One of the things we've been doing over the last year has been thinking about how we're going to surface multidimensional experiences in Power Query, and it's been a bit of a ride. We finally figured it out, and have an experience that we'd like to show you. The first example of this shows up in the work that we've been doing with SAP. We announced last month, or March it was, that we have a preview of SAP Business Objects Universe consumption, and we'd like to show you that. So this is still in preview. It's in the build that we released last week. So you can actually come in, copy the URL to a Business Objects server, and paste that in.
I wish we had something like reusing data sources and stuff. Like I just spent so time remembering these IPs.
Yeah, he's memorized the URL. Make a note of that. So what you're seeing is the navigator giving us a set of things that will help me navigate and find the things that I care about. So we're going to go into the Microsoft universe, and you can see business views and so on. And we're simply going to open up product and pick a set of dimensions. So let's pick product name, let's pick category name, and let's pick line name. And we'll also pick a set of measures.
Mm-hmm.
So let's open up measures.
Yep.
And we're going to pick under purchase, ordered quantity, and received quantity. Great. Now, notice the selected items shows a thing that I can hover on, and it tells me exactly what my view is going to look like, right? So this is this interactive experience, yet again, over multidimensional data. It's slightly different. Now I'm happy with this, so I can load it into the worksheet. Right? Pretty easy. One click again, you bring data down into your worksheet. This is sort of a pseudo report, right? Because you've picked a set of things from the universe and you have it in your workbook. Again, refreshable. Also, I can reshape this, right? So we can go into edit. The same set of experiences will help you reshape this data. So we want to move things around. Let's actually get line, category, and product in the right order. And let's actually filter on product. So we're interested in removing the a few items from here. So let's pick a few that that shouldn't be there. And then maybe collapse a dimension or two. So let's actually collapse product name. And we have a rolled up view that that effectively excludes those things that I selected and we've gone back to the summary view. So that's a pretty nice way of dealing with multidimensional data and getting a summary view that you care about. So again, just somewhat of a report. So pretty easy to do that. Questions? We've shown a lot, so let's take some questions. Yeah. What's that? Well, that's a secret. We'll have to tell you after. Anyone? Yep.
So when you query data from the web or like something that's published, are you able to refresh the data? Like, I don't see any option to refresh that data.
You have multiple places where you can refresh a query. It's just a query. Anything you do in Power Query is refreshable. Right? You can refresh it through the standard experiences in Excel for refreshing connections. The query tab has refresh. If you right-click on it, you'll have refresh in the query pane. So it shows up in multiple places.
So it's going all the way out to the original data?
Absolutely.
Tracking the manipulations that you
Yes. The question is it tracking the manipulations, and is it going back and refreshing and redoing the things for you? Yes. It's going to the data source, redoing the set of things you did, giving you back the data in the shape you want. Yeah. The question was, can I connect to SQL Server analysis services, tabular, multidimensional? It doesn't matter because eventually we will support both of them. We're very close, but we don't actually have it yet. Yeah. The Power Query, the question was, is Excel 2013 a must, or will it work with 2010? The Power Query add-in works with 2010 as well. Yeah. Yep.
Is there an SDK for writing your own boxes to gather data from sources?
Is there an SDK for writing your own providers?
Providers, or do we have to wait for the alpha?
Yeah, so the question was, can custom third parties plug in their own providers? At the moment, no, but we're looking at ways to open that up. Yeah. The question was about Twitter data and whether that will be a drop-down like Facebook. Twitter actually, so the deal with all of these data sources that are on the web is OAuth. And the fact that each one, OAuth is a standard, but of course everyone has their own standards. And so things are slightly different, and we haven't actually plumbed support for Twitter OAuth yet, but that's something that's on our list. We're also looking at ways to open up OAuth as a generic thing, maybe, but today Twitter isn't supported, but we're looking at. Yep. Automating the refresh on a schedule. So just, is there a way to do that? Just 2 weeks ago, I believe, in Power BI, we started rolling out the refresh features in SharePoint Online and Power BI. So if you have a workbook in Power BI and SharePoint Online as a part of that, you can schedule refreshes of data that connects to Oracle and SQL Server only for now, right? But that's just the first incremental step. We, of course, as you know, update Power Query and Power BI pretty frequently, so we're starting to roll that out. But refresh is only supported in that context today, automated. Yeah.
Certain ways to use these set of tools to bring non-normalized data. Specifically, every year I get a non-normalized report of expenditures from my energy department because it's category that extends like IT operation tracking. It just lists everything.
Yeah, so the question was, is there ways to normalize data that comes in weird formats, I believe. We'll show you some examples of that. Unpivot is an example of something, along those lines, but we'll show you some others. Yep. That's a great question. Is there a maximum row count size that you can bring in? Power Query does not have an inherent limitation. Everything you do in Power Query is essentially over a preview of data, which is what makes it really interactive even for big data workloads, right? So whether you're looking at, and the other part here is Power Query does what we call as query folding. So we push down queries to the underlying source as best as we can and as best as they support. So you'll see things be as interactive as we can with the given data source, but we also do local caching in cases where we don't fold and things like that. So you'll actually see a very rapid experience. So one of the examples we show on this is HDFS, and reshaping 120 gigabyte file with just the same interactivity that you saw here. And then, of course, to bring that down depends on your memory, depends on basically whether that's going to fit in your workbook and so on, right? The limits of essentially things that we don't control. So we're going to continue on.
All right.
And do a bit of an advanced scenario, and then start looking at some new features that aren't out there yet. So here's a web page. This one's a bit more interesting in that data is spread out across multiple pages, right? What you want, though, is a single table, right? So we're going to look at how we can do that with Power Query. So let's actually, Miguel, start importing this into a workbook.
Yep, let me create a new workbook. All right.
So we're going to go do our from web, right? And Miguel's going to walk you through the steps here.
Okay, so I'll just paste the URL, and we're going to go through the same navigator experience. It's scanning for all of the tables within that page. It's coming back here, all right? So it's table 1. But in this case, let's go in because we'll need to do some reshape operations. So apparently, everything here looks just fine in this table. Like, we have a bunch of columns. We want all of them. We're good with it. But these pages, when you're doing web scraping, there's sometimes that they bite you. And this is one of the examples. So let's go back to the page and see what's going on here. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of this page, you see that there's these 3 lines within that table that they're actually not part of the data set. So how do we go about cleaning that up?
Yeah, and if you scroll down, you'll see that there's some extra bits there.
There you go. These three rows here, what do we do with them? So usually I would go in, and if it was just this specific table, I know that there's 100 items on this page. So I could go ahead and do keeping the top rows, and I would keep the top 100. But there's a problem with that.
Yeah, any problems with that? Yeah, the last page. And last time when I did this demo, we actually did a custom formula that that effectively calculated the row count and -3 and all of that. Now, what are we going to do?
We do the math for you, and we give you this remove bottom rows option, and you just say I want to remove 3 rows from the bottom. So it's all good. It's gone.
And it gives you the formula, and you don't have to worry about those kinds of things. You just have to remember that you need to do remove bottom rows. So great. So we actually have our query, and let's bring that down. Now, we're bringing a single page, and the thing we need to do is automate this, right? And of course, if you were to look at the URL, there's a parameter that you can pass in, which is the page. So we are actually going to effectively leverage that.
Yep.
So we're going to go ahead and turn this query into a function. So it's a bit of an advanced scenario where I know that this is the particular query that I've created, and we're going to turn this thing into a function. So we're going to specify that we get 1 parameter going in, and we're going to split the URL here and essentially use page. But we also know that we're getting in a number. We have to turn that into text before we append it or concatenate it into the URI. Great. So we have our function. Let's give it a name. And we're going to invoke this. So let's go ahead and try an invocation.
Okay, so I could click invoke here from inside the query editor and say maybe I want page number 2.
And there's
here's the page number 2 with.
There's page number 2, right? So almost there. Now let's keep this function. We're going to come back into Excel, and we're going to now create effectively the one query that fetches data from these pages. So let's go ahead and use the from blank query option, which lets me write my own formulas. And what we're going to do is we know we have 7 pages in this case to bring down, right? So we do the expression that gives me a sequence of 7 digits. Now we can start shaping this. We turn this into a table using the UI, and then we can insert a custom column, where the custom column is really going to be a get page, the function, with the first column going in as the parameter. All right? So we have some data coming back. You can actually see we have many pages coming back. And again, using the UI, we can now expand this and essentially get the set of pages all concatenated into one table, right? Multiple pages of data coming back, and we can land that into Excel.
All right, let's even remove one column before we do that. Okay, and here we go.
How many of you would find that useful? Yeah, great. Now, the thing about functions is they are incredibly powerful, but we haven't really had much support for functions in the system. In fact, I have this function in my workbook. I can't really invoke it unless I go into the editor. Now we're showing you the new build, the thing that's about to come. Everything you're going to see from here on is new, right? So one of the things we've added, so we have the same exact function in this workbook here. You can see that there's a little fx that shows up. We've tried to make it a little nice. But one of the things you can do is from within Excel, without ever having to go into the query editor, I can invoke that function. So I can say invoke, and I can specify a parameter, and I can bring that down, right? So here we are talking to the web page, running the same exact function, and we're hopefully going to land the data into Excel. We've switched to a different machine, so.
Yeah. All
There
right,
we go.
Good.
Yeah? So that's invoking functions. Now, where this becomes really useful, the reason why we did this, think about sharing and functions. If you take these functions as parameterized queries, if you think of these as parameterized queries, you can publish these into the catalog. And when I find these things, I can invoke them without ever having to go into the editor. We do think that broadly, more users are going to just stay in Excel and do things, and that's why we added this functionality. So soon, you'll be able to share functions and invoke them with minimal friction in the UI. Okay. You asked about normalizing data. So let's take a look at an example of normalizing. So here's a workbook that I created. This was actually based on, to give credit where credit is due, based on a problem that a set of Excel MVPs were discussing about, and said, hey, I have this thing, and is it possible for me to import it? So it's kind of weird, right? It's you can see that maybe there's unpivot involved, but it's multi-level. There's sales for 3 different cities, and we want to see what we can do with Power Query, right? So we're going to come into a workbook here where we already said from file, and so here's the raw file that we've pulled into Excel, right? So there it is. So the first thing we're going to do here is actually, before going anywhere, one of the things we're doing in the future, in an upcoming build, is reorganizing our ribbon. So you have this new transforms ribbon that shows up with a whole bunch of transforms that show up for you, right? These were all available in the engine, but now you don't have to write custom formulas to make these make use of them. So one of the things we're going to do here is we're actually going to transpose this data set, which basically flips it 90 degrees. And then the first thing we're going to do is actually promote, use first row as headers, so we get the year up there. And then, anyone want to tell me what we want to do with column 1? You want to do a fill down. So you want to keep filling those nulls until you hit a value, and then you want to keep doing that. So we can do fill down, right? One click again to fill down. And now
we can fix up the names.
Give it some names.
City, and let's say type.
And then, anybody? What do we want to do with the years? Unpivot. Get in the hang of it. So unpivot will do that for us, and now we can clean up a few more things. So call that year, call that sales, and we can change that to be a number.
All right, I made a mistake, fat finger, but I can remove my applied step and be back here. Okay. Good.
All right, so there you have a completely different view of that data that made sense in a spreadsheet, but now it's much more structured. Yeah? Okay.
All right. So great. I think Faisal is hesitant about introducing the next demo because this is the one that he told me you have 10 minutes to make some jokes, so this is the part. So in
This
this
is
demo,
Miguel's joke.
this is my
spot.
prime time for the session. We
Yeah.
have 25 minutes left, so we have about 10 minutes for jokes, and then we can go in and just talk about serious stuff. But I want to get to this. So I'm going to use the opportunity of showing one of our connectors. We mentioned it quickly earlier, is the connector for Microsoft Exchange. It's something that we added maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And I've already connected here to my Exchange account. So what you can see here is my email inbox, my calendar, my people, so my contacts. I have my tasks, and they're preloading, so there you go. So I want to go into mail, and I'm going to ask you all to, as I do this, just close your eyes for 2 seconds, and then I just remove the subject column. Okay, you can open them again, so you don't find out what I'm just doing behind the scenes with my Microsoft email. But here, there's a few things that I want to show you that are new. The first thing, well, this is not new, but we have this folder path column that basically gives me the path to all of the folders within my inbox where I have email. Now, I create a lot of rules, and basically what I do is I have a dedicated folder for the emails that are sent directly to me. So in this case, if you go into filter, you see that there's only one checkbox, and this is because of how Power Query samples data. This is actually giving me the distinct folder path items or values within the preview that we've downloaded. But there's cases in which you would like to see beyond that preview, like beyond the top 200 or 2,000 rows that we use. So for that, we added this load more button, which basically it's going to issue a new query against Exchange, in this case, and it's going to query for the top 1,000 distinct items in this column. So that's what we just did. I don't have 1,000 columns, but I have quite a few. So I'm going to use the search experience here on filter so that I can use the to me column. So this is just now subsetting this query to just the items that had my email in the to line. And let's go ahead and do a few things here. So this is a very wide table. It has information about the folder, the sender, the display to and CC lines. I could also expand the to and CC recipients and do a bunch of stuff. I have dates. I have the importance of the email, like if it's high importance or low, and so on. So let's go ahead and use this new experience to choose the columns that I want to keep. Normally, I would have done control-click and remove columns, remove other columns, and so on. But we just thought that that was so hard when you have a really wide table. So in this case, we use the choose columns dialog, which is a new thing in this build. It's still not publicly available. But here I can go in and start searching for the things that I want to keep. For instance, I would like to keep the sender and actually disable everything, then click that guy, then remove. Actually, let's start like that. So I want to keep the sender. I would like to keep the date time received, and that's about it, actually. So I want to do a couple of different analyses on top of my inbox. I want to look at how many emails I receive every day or by day over the last few years to see what the trend looks like. And then I would also like to understand who sends me more emails or less emails. So just kind of do some BI, like lightweight BI analysis on my email. And then I would also like to see what times of the day or what days of the week are the busiest in terms of incoming email for me, so I can plan ahead of time and just be aware of that. So for that, the first thing I'm going to do is just expand the name and address of the senders here so that I can look at who sends me the most emails. And then let's play a little bit with this date time received column. So this is a date time stamp. And I mentioned a couple of things that I wanted to look at. I wanted to look at specifically the weekday. So for that, we added this insert ribbon, as Faisal was saying, that has a lot of capabilities. So it has new transformations for date and time. And in this case, since I have a date, what I could do is just create the date only. And now I could do something else, which is, given a date, I could also pick the day of the week. So I have it here, day of week. So this is from 0 to 6, and it starts on Sunday. So we need to do something about this column because I don't understand that 1 is Monday, that 2 is Tuesday, and so on and so forth. So a little trick here. We're going to build a custom formula for a new column that's based on we mentioned earlier how Power Query supports definition of lists. We use that for the 1 to 7 list for OfficeBox, the Box Office module demo. But here I can build up a list that basically has the days of the week. And okay, this is going to be fun because you don't have the double quotes. Okay, so okay, I'm going to do it in a different way. which is not what I wanted to show, but I'm going to just do replace value operations. So it turns out this guy's laptop, the keyboard, actually stopped working this morning. So I'm here just dealing with a subset of the keys, which is kind of playing Minesweeper, because you don't know where you're going to step into a mine, so I just did with one.
That was a practical joke on Miguel that I pulled.
Yep. So let's turn this into a text column first. I'm completely off a script here, so I hope it works. And let's replace one with Monday. All right. Then let's replace 0 with Sunday. And you know where this is going, right?
I think we can skip through this part. And
OK, let's just keep then the...
I mean, you get the idea.
Yeah. OK, so then we'll have to get used to the index-based. So it's 0-based, and it starts on Sunday, so it completely throws me off.
But the idea is you can actually create a list that has values that effectively go from Monday through the end of the week, and then you can index into that. So you take your number and index into that, and you get the actual value coming out. And that's what Miguel was trying to type out.
Right. Actually, as I think about it, I can go into the other workbook that I have. I had preloaded it here because I had 43,000 rows of email. Like I've received all those 43,000 emails. So here I can show you the step that I was trying to do. I was trying to, first, I projected here the hours with time hour, which is something that's actually on the insert tab. So you could have used it down here. And then the one that I wanted to show you is this beautiful formula here, which is going to basically, as Faisal was saying, define a list with the weeks, the days of the week, and then it's going to use the day of week column to use it as an index-based access. So it ends up creating new column that has all of the days of the week. And then I just expanded here the sender email. So that's it. I'll just close that, don't refresh, because this will take a couple hours to refresh my 45,000 emails. But let's look at the output. So I started looking at emails sent directly to me by date. This kind of started on July 3 years ago. So for those of you, some of you here know me for a little bit. I started at Microsoft 6 years ago, and I was a software engineer. So the guys who are just typing in some code and not doing emails and meetings like this guy does these days, or I do these days as well. So you see how it started very low, like 20, 25 emails per day. Then this spike here, it's when I became a program manager. And this spike here last year is when we started just releasing Power Query, and we started just talking to customer a lot. So you see the spikes here are like up to 160 emails, 158 emails per day directly to me, so I had to reply to most of these. And then I said, okay, yeah, this is a lot of email, but who is sending me all of these emails? And then I built this other view. So this guy sent me 3,200 emails over the last, I think he's been my boss for 2.5 years, so that's what, 700 days, so that's basically almost 5 emails per day, what he sent me.
Now you see why we're getting all these features.
Yeah. And actually, I demoed this the first time 3 months ago. Since then, he's sending me less emails. But he's like, he's stopping by my office to ask me for things that you'd naturally send by email. He sends me texts on the phone. He calls me. He leaves me sticky notes, writes on my whiteboard and stuff. So I just need to be able to have a new data source in Power Query that is importing from my whiteboard. So I can also count how many times he writes in, or my AT&T account, and just get in my number of messages. We'll get there at some point. I should actually do that as a follow-up demo with a CSV file or something. But then, okay, he sends me 5, 6 emails a day, but that's actually not uniform, because I looked at emails from Faisal, and here's where I use the day of the week. So the first one is showing how many emails he sent me on every day of the week. So he sends me email every day, of course. Saturdays are a little bit more quiet. So interesting thing on Saturdays, this guy, he might probably go out in the morning, or maybe he sleeps late, and then around 3 p.m., he starts just cranking up. On Sundays, he's fairly quiet in the morning, he has lunch, then he says, okay, I have dinner, I'll go just hammer Miguel with emails. Then the rest of the week is just a common pattern, like it's really active in the mornings, then he goes out a little bit, and then after 8, like he goes back to email every day, except for Friday, where apparently At 1 p.m. he says, okay, I'm done for the week, and then he goes off. I say,
Got to take a break sometime.
I leave Miguel in the office to take care of all this email. I'll just go off. Okay, so that's Exchange.
So that is Exchange, and it's it's all fun when you look at these things, and and folks were scratching their heads thinking, why would you support Exchange as a data source? But really, think about it. If you have mailboxes where you get auto-generated emails and things like the frowns that you send us or the smiles that you send us, we can mine all of that, right? And Power Query is good enough to be able to crack through a set of things in those messages to help you get to some of these things. So don't take that lightly. There's still quite a bit of value in Exchange as a data source. Now, we saved the best for the last. Now, Miguel was complaining about the fact that he had to type in that URL, right? How many of you hate the fact that you have to keep typing in server names and things? Yeah, I know folks who would be ecstatic about this. It's not a huge feature, right? But we've added this thing called recent data sources, where we can now come in and look at recent data sources. So for example, I can click on the SAP Business Object Server that we connected to earlier, or is that the one?
It's the other one. But
and there you go. No credentials prompts, no server names, nothing, right? It just brings you into the thing you've used before, and you can actually pin some of the things you care about. So I can go in and manage the favorites, if you will, and I can have those as first-class items. Cool? Yeah. So we thought you'd like that. That's been the #1 feedback, I think, in terms of just feature requests. That is a new capability, but some basic bread and butter. A couple of other things. So let's look at search. So what we are doing soon is you can come in and search for data. So I'm signed into Power BI. And you have this problem of things being interleaved, and I can't really tell my corporate results from my public data. And now we've essentially given you 2 different tabs. So you can actually look at both of those.
Yeah, organization data and public data.
Panes.
And you get the counts now, which is something that was not there before. You just got the total count before. So now you get a better sense for how many people inside your organization are publishing things related to that search.
Yep. And finally, one of the options we've added also, this is feedback, is, hey, I'm always importing data into the data model, not into the worksheet. I always want data going into the data model. So if you go into options, this is actually already out there. You can specify default load settings. I can choose data needs to go into the model always, right? And I can change that. And when you change that, then anything you do will get loaded into that specific destination. So we can actually show you.
So for instance, in this case, I'm using a query from search, which normally would just land it into the worksheet, as you saw by default. Now it's going to go straight into the data model. Whenever the Google guys want us to go into the data model. But that's all right. So this was the last demo, actually.
Yep, that's it. So let's switch to slides.
Yep.
All right, so we've looked at the basics. We've looked at what we've done since last year. We've also shown you some things that are coming soon. And in terms of related content, so we would urge you to check out some of these talks. Deep dive into the Power Query formula language. That's happening tomorrow. Tessa and Matt Mason from the team are doing that talk. It goes really deep into the language, into the expressions, and how you can leverage everything that's beneath the UI. There's quite a bit of goodness, quite a bit of power in the engine that allows you to run these queries. And then there's a set of sessions, Power Query and Modern Corporate BI, the BI Power Hour, all you need to know about Microsoft Power BI for Office 365 in case you didn't catch the Office 365 and the Power BI integration. And then there's a session on visualization as well. Track resources, of course, I'll just quickly show that. So download those pieces, try out Power BI for Office 365. Also make sure you get the latest Power Query for Excel download that's out there that has many of the things we saw. So that's it. We're going to do Q&A. But before that, please, do your evaluations. Help us out. Every bit of feedback helps, whether it's about the product, whether it's about the session, whether it's about Miguel's jokes. We can, tone that up or down, depending on your taste. And yeah, finally, let us know what you think. So questions, Q&A. We have 10 minutes. Yep.
The Exchange data source, we saw his inbox. Is that credential prompted? So in other words, if I'm an administrator, can I see everybody's mailbox? How does that?
No, the Exchange mailbox question is about, well, it actually showed his, Miguel's mailbox. If the first time you come in, it would actually ask you for credentials. So if somebody sent you a workbook and you hit refresh, you're not going to be able to pull that down. You have to log in as you.
Right, but so I'm sorry, so I could log in as an Exchange administrator to see my whole environment.
Yeah, so imagine the query that I created that gets by day, and I publish that and he downloads that. He'll get prompt for something that is the email address and the password. So you could put a different email address, and if it has the same shape, like you saw the thing that I did with the folders and the rules.
You're going to
be,
see what the account is entitled to see.
I'm saying if I'm creating the report.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. If you don't have Office 365, what features are you missing? You will get all of the client features that we showed in Excel today, right? You will, if you don't have Power BI for Office 365, that distinction is important. That's a subscription to a set of connected BI experiences in the cloud. You will not see the things that allowed me to find corporate data, that allowed me to share my results with my corporation, and a whole bunch of other BI features that are not related to Power Query. Yeah, so PowerBI.com has all of that data. Question?
Based on your experience, how difficult would it take, or how long does it take for a business user to adapt and use some of the feature by BI?
Yeah, the question is how long do basic essentially end users take to adapt to these experiences? So it ranges. We have designed the experience so that there's these sort of steps up depending on your sophistication. We spend a lot of time in making sure that the basic of discovering and landing some data is super easy. Whether that's finding public data or whether that's finding corporate data. The things like refresh, we make that really front and center. Also, we think that anyone who spends a fair amount, just a little bit of time understanding how the system works, so the conceptual model, it's not that hard to get your head around it. We don't ever expect you to go into the advanced query editing mode. In fact, when you install Power Query, the formula bar that you saw is hidden, right? You have to enable that. So we don't expect a ton of sophistication, and that's an important design aspect, principle. Great question. How involved does IT have to be so users don't have to go through the aspects of technical setup? So if the system isn't locked down, Power Query by itself is easy to install. They can get going with public search right away. Things that require IT involvement today would be Power BI, so the service and configuring and getting your tenant provisioned in the cloud and enabling you for things like refreshing these workbooks in the cloud. Now, all that said, self-service is a really important part of our vision, so we are looking at more ways to empower users to get their stuff done without being dependent on IT. That's a principle for us as well. Yep.
Two quick questions. First is, as you start to nest queries within Power BI or within Power Query, how does the performance?
What do you mean? So as you nest queries within?
Query and then you share it with the organization, somebody consumes that, creates another transformation.
Yeah.
You do that a number of times. What's the performance?
That's a good question. As you sort of merge these queries and and sort of take a dependency on a query and do other things, so how does that affect performance? The nice thing about the engine is the engine doesn't care how the query is authored. The engine is going to look at the entire query and do the best thing it can given that query, right? So actually, the steps almost never get performed in the way you authored them, right? There's a bunch of optimization that happens that will leverage, enable the engine to do the right thing for the query, right? And so that's an important distinction. You don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
Two questions. First, if someone changes the web page, it is not unusual to
Yeah, it's a good question. This happens, we get this all the time about web data, right? What happens when the page changes? If the page is, in terms of schema broken, or, in terms of structure, a new table gets added and our index is off, yeah, you're going to run into a problem. Today, we don't really have a way, other than when you hit refresh, to know that you're broken. We're looking at ways in which that can be sort of automated, but today we don't have anything. So you are at the mercy of your data sources to some extent. But with web, what are you going to do, right? The only thing we can do is give you better features over time to help you detect. We can never solve that for you.
I mean, it's okay if it doesn't work. I just like a big red flag.
You need to know, yeah. We understand, yep.
And the second part of my question was, can you time limit this stuff? So, like, a lot of times you do iterative development, and I know you have a preview mode, but I'm probably not going to do exactly what I want to do the first time. If I'm working with a 2 million row set, I'd like to know that I got it wrong in 2 minutes and not 30 minutes.
So everything you're doing in the preview is iterative. It's never on the entire set of data. It's on the top 1,000 rows, I believe. You saw things like I have to explicitly ask for more, where Miguel showed, we detect you have too much. We're not going to try and pull it all. And so it is, by definition, when you're in the query editor, based on a small subset of your data. Now, in the future, we can do better with things like sampling. So we give you a more representative sample and things like that. We're not there yet, but those are coming. Yep.
Speak a little bit in regards to mechanisms for governance.
So governance, so the question was, could I talk to governance of published queries? So if you're in Power BI for Office 365, there's a whole set of experiences that we refer to as data stewardship and management experiences, where you as the query owner, or you as the data steward, a blessed data steward who has special powers, can certify queries as master data, right? Things that people should use. So if we went and searched in the Microsoft tenant, for example, there's a whole bunch of sales-related data hierarchies, official hierarchies that you're supposed to use. They show up with a special ribbon and certified for use. It's been certified by a data steward. The data stewards, or anyone who publishes queries, can also come in and see all the shared queries. If you hover over it, you can actually click on the link there and view statistics. So if you go ahead and do that, Miguel, let's actually do it right here.
I did that, but you need to punch in your password.
Okay, great. So you can go into this portal that shows you who's, how popular is your query, who's using it. Did it all of a sudden get used by 1,000 people and become mission critical? We clearly have a long way to go on those sets of experiences where you'd see things like this particular query might be broken, right? So governance and data stewardship is a first-class thing in Power BI, and it'll get better over time. Yep.
When you do a data refresh, is it considered a step where you can refer back to what it was previously?
Question is, when you do a refresh, is it considered a step? It works much like in Excel today. That refresh isn't codified into the query. So it's not.
You have no way of getting back to the refresh until your data.
No, so we have done special things in the latest build that will prevent your data from being blown away if refresh failed. Yeah. So the latest build that's out there, if you hit refresh and something errors out, we'll still preserve your old stuff. Yeah.
And if it doesn't, send a frown, please.
You know where that's going. Yeah.
Is there any way to use the code outside of Power Query package for other types?
Great question. Is there any way to use the query outside of Power Query? We think of the query as the query engine and the language as a thing that is designed for broader scenarios than Excel. So the question that comes up often is SSIS. Can I run this as a part of an SSIS job? And many other things. So we are actively looking at other places where this will show up. So it's not limited to Excel. We think you can use these things in data in information production scenarios beyond Excel. We're just not there yet. Yeah. Yes.
The visualizations themselves, can they be exported and then refreshed?
The visualizations themselves, can they be exported and refreshed? So today the visualizations live either in the workbook that you have on your desktop, which you can refresh, or in Power BI for Office 365, where refresh works as well. We don't quite have refresh in that scenario where I'm viewing this thing on the web working with Power Query-based workbooks yet. So and then there's, of course, scheduled refresh where things will, a refresh will automatically update your entire workbook with, with everything. Because ultimately, it's the data model that gets refreshed, and everything that, that looks at the data in the data model will get refreshed if a scheduled refresh happens.
But the play of how Rafael Nadal animated to be better than Brazil, can that animation be exported even if I can't refresh?
Yes.
So what do you mean by exported? Where?
To a web element or an animation that I want to post on Facebook, for example?
Yeah, so I think so that's a more of a visualization question that that the eventual goal is to support that. I don't know if you can.
You should go to tomorrow's afternoon session for Power BI.
On visualization.
But long story short, there's a way for you to upload that workbook to SharePoint in Office 365 in Power BI, and then export that in a way that you can embed it into a blog, for instance. In fact, if you look at the Power BI blog on MSDN, you'll see that some of the reports in there are using that technique. So stop by tomorrow's session with Lucas and Crystal, and they'll be able to tell you.
Yeah, and you can ask them about the exact refresh semantics and all of that. We have one more minute, or we're over time.
40,
so, thanks everyone for coming. We will be around for the entire conference, so you can find us at the data platform section in the expo hall. So feel free to come by and bug us.
And I have more jokes for everyone, so keep coming.
So you have things like models containing tables and relationships and all of that stuff in Excel, which was pretty new at the time, still is quite amazing. We followed that up with Power View, right? So 2013, Excel has Power View built in. It has Power Pivot and the X Velocity engine built in. So you have all this capability to do pretty cool visualizations over your data. Except, we never showed you in any of the demos how we actually got the data into the workbook, right? We always started out with a workbook that was filled with data, and the dirty little secret was, well, it was actually quite a bit of work to get that data in. Power Map, I should have gone to that slide, is another visualization engine and capability that you have in Excel today. So again, same problem. How do you get data to all of those tools? So Power Query really is focused on two things. Allowing you to find data that you care about in Excel, right? It should be easy for you within Excel to find the data that you want, whether it's internal data or external data, so public, premium, things that data vendors sell, for example, as well as enterprise data, sales revenue, forecasting, finance, whatever kinds of data that you have within your firewall. And then, of course, experiences for self-service data transformations, mashups. So you can think of it as ETL for the masses, right? Good to go. All right, I think it's just about time, so let's get started. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to TechEd. Welcome to Houston. We're super happy to have you here. I hope you're having a fantastic first day at the conference here. My name's Faisal Mahmood. I'm a program manager on the Power Query team at Microsoft.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miguel Llopis, and I'm also a program manager in the Power Query team. My main responsibility on Power Query is about the user experience. So for some of you who've already used Power Query, and if you've hit anything that looked confusing or you couldn't figure out how to do it, that was my fault. But since I'm going to be here all the week, feel free to approach us after the session or throughout the week on the booth on the expo area so that we can talk about it and hopefully we'll fix it.
So the way this works is Miguel takes all the blame, I take all the credit, and we're a happy family. So it's been a year since I did the overview talk at TechEd New Orleans. How many of you were there for Power Query? So a few of you. This is going to be somewhat of an overlap, and as we were designing this talk, we thought, well, if folks come back to the talk again, we don't want it to be a complete repeat. So we've taken a bit of a different approach here. We are still going to spend a bunch of time talking about why Power Query is interesting. So we'll spend some time there. But then most of the talk's really going to be, but is pretty crude and yet another experience, right? And a set of options around delimiters and the kind of typing that you want around data types. and some advanced text import settings and so on. From SQL Server, so we start to get a little better. We allow you to specify a server name. You pick a bunch of tables, and you essentially import data down. It's really hard if you want to do things like filtering. I haven't used this experience in a long time to know whether or not filtering was even possible, but certainly previews were not possible. So of course, 2 data tabs are better than 1. So as we designed Power Pivot, the limitations that we had, we of course wanted to overcome, and so Power Pivot has its own data tab, and this of course leads to even more fragmentation. The focus of the Power Pivot team was not data acquisition, data shaping, data import, and so this is where we are, right? But it's better. It's actually a lot better. And if you're using Power Pivot, you're probably primarily using this experience, where you can pick, it's a bit more modern, and actually you get previews. Pretty cool. So previews you'll see is a fundamental part of what Power Query supports, and is almost crucial for the experience we enable. A whole bunch of data sources. So yet again, a set of data sources that you can. So SSIS and the capability of doing those kinds of things right within Excel, including things like merging multiple data sources, right? All of that done as an end user, as an information worker using Excel. So that's why we introduced Power Query. And the promise here is we're not going to use any prep data, right? Any demo you see today, we're going to be getting the data fresh from the sources, bringing it in, and doing the sets of things we care about. So current state of the art. I did this last year as well, just to sort of put in context the kinds of experiences you have today, right? So taking Excel, we have the data tab. This is how you primarily bring data into Excel. And the data tab's been around for a long time. We have evolved it, but we have a set of fragmented experiences for many good reasons, right? We can't immediately just sort of pull the rug from underneath and change these experiences in a single day. But here's an example. From Access, you get a set of dialogues that lead you through picking some tables and bringing them in. From Web, actually some nice things about it. You get an actual preview and a rendering of the web page, and you can select the data that you care about. Except it doesn't work a lot of the times, right? It just has a lot of limitations. And I'm being honest about the state of things here. From Text, works well. We focused on the things we've done since last year. So everything, we do monthly updates. So everything we've done month after month, you'll be seeing a lot of the features here. So this will still be hopefully fresh for a lot of you. Now, since you're joining us in person, we also have a special surprise for you. We're actually going to show you some of the things that are not public yet, mainly in the way of user experiences, things we're improving. So you will get to see some things that are brand new that very few folks outside of Microsoft have actually seen. So that we think you'll find useful. How many of you already installed and use Power Query day to day? All right, so that's better than last year, and we're clearly making progress. So, and Power Pivot. Oh, okay. All right. So more. So we started down the self-service BI journey a few years ago with Power Pivot, right? We introduced this Power Pivot add-in for Office 2010. That's really when this whole thing kind of started out in terms of Excel and BI experiences in Excel. And what we did with Power Pivot was quite revolutionary at the time, right? We basically gave you an enterprise-grade in-memory analytics engine in your desktop machine, right? So the more memory you had, the better it was. But that was pretty cool to have something that effectively AS analysis services runs on the server. You have all of that power on the desktop.